A single message, just a few words on a screen, and everything changed. He wasn't supposed to be home that night, but fate had other plans. What he saw shattered his world, but instead of falling apart, he did something no one expected. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He simply started planning. What followed wasn't just revenge. It was the complete and total destruction of those who betrayed him. And it all began with one silent decision. As the plane began its descent into Logan International Airport, Daniel Mercer's fingers tapped rhythmically against the armrest. He wasn't supposed to be here, not yet. The tech summit in Berlin had 3 more days left, and his schedule was packed with keynote panels and networking events. But one notification had changed everything. A simple, cryptic text message on Elena's phone had set his thoughts spiraling. Meeting confirmed for 2 a.m. You know where? He had seen it purely by chance, a brief flash on her lock screen as she left her phone on the nightstand. When he had asked about it, she had brushed it off as something work-related. Yet something gnawed at him. Why would a professional meeting take place at such an odd hour? And why had she seemed so tense when he had casually mentioned it? Years spent programming complex algorithms had trained Daniel's mind to detect patterns, to recognize anomalies that others might overlook. And this felt wrong. By the time he had retrieved his luggage and hailed a cab, his mind had cycled through every possible explanation. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was about to ruin his own peace of mind for no reason. But doubt had already taken root, and there was no suppressing it now. The taxi pulled up in front of their home, a sleek, contemporary structure he had meticulously designed to incorporate the latest in smart home technology. Every detail, from the automated security system to the voice-activated lighting, had been configured to his exact specifications. He had always found comfort in control, in knowing every aspect of his environment operated precisely as intended. But something felt off. As Daniel stepped out of the vehicle, a strange silence greeted him.
No motion triggered lights.
No soft hum of automated background music. The house, which should have recognized his return, remained eerily still. He pressed his palm against the biometric lock. The door slid open, but instead of the usual warmth of a familiar homecoming, a deep unease settled over him. "Elena?" He called out into the dimly lit hallway. No response. His footsteps echoed unnaturally against the polished hardwood as he moved toward the living room. Everything appeared in place, the furniture arranged just as he had left it, the scent of lavender lingering faintly in the air. But the quiet was suffocating. His eyes flicked to the home security panel. The system had been manually deactivated earlier that night. That wasn't normal. A faint sound broke the stillness. A ripple of water. Daniel's body tensed. The bathroom. He moved without thought, his strides measured, his senses sharpening as he ascended the stairs. The master bedroom door was ajar, a sliver of golden light spilling into the hallway. Another splash, followed by a murmur of voices. He pushed the door open. Through the billowing steam rising from the ensuite bathroom, the scene before him solidified in sharp detail. Elena, and someone else. A man reclined in the oversized spa tub, his arm draped lazily around her shoulders. The faint glimmer of candlelight reflected in the surface of the water, dancing over their intertwined forms. Daniel's eyes registered the half-empty bottle of vintage wine on the floor, the scent of rose-infused bath oil clinging to the air. Time seemed to slow. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, taking in the sight. The betrayal crystallized in his mind, each detail meticulously recorded, dissected, stored away. 1,000 simulations of this moment had played out in his head on the drive home, but none had prepared him for the reality of it. Yet, as he stood in the doorway, he felt no immediate surge of anger, no outburst of emotion. Instead, a cold detachment settled over him, a mechanism honed by years of problem-solving. They hadn't noticed him yet, too absorbed in their whispered conversation. His hands moved automatically, retrieving his phone. A few silent taps, and the discreet surveillance system embedded in the bathroom mirror whirred to life. The feed streamed directly to a secure server, insurance for what was to come. "Elena!" he finally said, his voice devoid of emotion. The reaction was instant. She turned sharply, eyes wide with shock, her body stiffening as if an electric current had shot through her. Water sloshed against the tub's edge. Daniel didn't react. He simply observed. The way her breath hitched, the frantic flicker of her gaze between him and her companion, the way she instinctively pulled the nearest towel over herself, as if that could erase what had already been seen. The man beside her didn't bother with pretense. He straightened, running a hand through damp hair, and smirked, a self-assured, arrogant expression that set something deep inside Daniel alight. "Didn't expect you back so soon," the man said. Daniel's eyes remained unreadable, betraying nothing. Elena recovered quickly, her shock morphing into something else, something closer to defiance. Her expression hardened, lips pressing into a thin line. "You were supposed to be in Berlin," she said. Daniel said nothing. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. He could feel the weight of it pressing down, suffocating in its finality. Elena's gaze searched his, looking for some reaction, some opening she could manipulate. But there was nothing. Finally, she exhaled sharply, her voice laced with something that almost sounded like irritation. "Daniel, we can talk about this." He turned, walked away. Each step away from that room felt deliberate, calculated. He wasn't interested in explanations. The facts were in front of him, undeniable and irreversible. As he moved through the house, his mind shifted into a different mode. The detachment he had felt earlier now sharpened into something else entirely. A sense of purpose. The world he had built so carefully had shattered, but from the ruins, something new would rise. By the time Elena called his name again, he was already collecting what mattered. Important documents, essential belongings, anything of value. The rest, her, the memories, the life they had shared, was nothing more than data to be deleted. By the time she reached him, breathless and desperate, her tone had changed. The arrogance had faded, replaced with something softer, more pleading. "Daniel, wait. We can fix this." He zipped his suitcase. "No," he said, his voice as cold and precise as a machine executing a final command. He walked past her, down the stairs, through the front door. As he stepped into the waiting cab, he felt no need to look back. The past was behind him. The future was his to rebuild. The city skyline blurred past as Daniel Mercer sat in the back seat of the cab, his mind calculating every possible outcome. The weight of what he had just witnessed should have been crushing, but instead, it sharpened his focus. He had spent his career designing systems that could detect vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. Now, that same precision would be applied to something far more personal. By the time he reached his temporary residence, a minimalist high-rise apartment he had secured months ago as a contingency, his emotions had settled into something cold and mechanical. The apartment was designed for function, not comfort. No sentimental clutter, just efficiency. As the door locked behind him, he moved with purpose. His first action was securing everything that mattered. The legal and financial ties he had to Elena had to be severed immediately. He powered on his laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting in his unreadable gaze as he initiated the security protocols he had built for situations exactly like this. The divorce proceedings would begin at dawn, but the real work started now. Daniel had never been the kind of man to act on impulse. Every decision was calculated, every action a step toward a larger goal. The affair itself was inconsequential in the grand scheme. What mattered was control. Elena and her lover had made the mistake of underestimating him. With a few keystrokes, he accessed the hidden surveillance archive in his home security system. The cameras had been installed as a precaution, a failsafe embedded in the very technology he had spent years perfecting. The footage from the master bathroom appeared in crisp resolution. It was all there, the whispered conversation, the way they looked at each other, the moment of betrayal captured from every angle. He transferred the files to an encrypted server and set the permissions. Not for public release. Not yet. Timing was everything. The next step required outside expertise. He needed information, and he needed it fast. There were people who specialized in uncovering what others wanted hidden, and he had the resources to employ the best. He reached for his phone and dialed a number given to him years ago, a contingency for when things in business got complicated. The call was answered on the second ring. "Pierce Investigations," a crisp voice greeted. "Evelyn, it's Mercer." There was a brief pause before the voice softened slightly. "It's been a while. What can I do for you?" "I need a deep dive. Comprehensive. Every financial transaction, business dealing, and personal connection linked to a man named Nathan Raines." Another pause. Then a slow exhale. "That's a big ask. How far do you want me to go?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "I want everything. Nothing stays buried." "Understood." He ended the call, his expression unreadable. Nathan Raines, Elena's business partner, the man she had wrapped herself around in the dim glow of candlelight. Daniel had barely acknowledged his existence before tonight. That changed now. People like Nathan always had skeletons. It was just a matter of uncovering them. The next name on his list was one he hadn't expected to call. But circumstances had changed, and alliances could be forged in the most unlikely of places. Charlotte Hayes had been married to Nathan for 15 years. As far as Daniel knew, she had filed for divorce a week ago. The timing was more than a coincidence. He found her number easily enough. When he called, she answered after 3 rings. "Hello." Her voice was wary. "This is Daniel Mercer." A brief silence. Then a careful, measured response. "I know who you are. Why are you calling me?" "Because we have a common interest," he said simply. She didn't hang up, which was a good start. "What kind of interest?" she asked. "The kind that ensures your soon-to-be ex-husband faces consequences for more than just infidelity." Another pause. Then, something new in her voice, curiosity. "I'm listening." Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbow on the desk. "Nathan Raines has made a career out of deception. I have resources that can expose him, but I need information. You know his patterns, his weaknesses. I want to know everything." Charlotte hesitated, and for a moment he thought she might refuse. But then she exhaled sharply. "You're right," she said. "There's more to Nathan than people realize. And if you're serious about exposing him, I have something you'll want to see." Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. "How soon can you meet?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll send you the location." The call ended, and Daniel set the phone down, his mind already processing the next steps. As dawn broke over the city, Daniel was already 2 steps ahead. The information pipeline was in place. The investigation into Nathan had begun, and Charlotte had agreed to share what she knew. He had no intention of acting recklessly. Every move had to be deliberate, every action designed to dismantle the foundation of those who had crossed him. Elena had made a choice. Now she would face the consequences of it. Nathan had stepped into the wrong man's life. Soon he would realize his mistake. And Daniel Mercer, logical, calculating, always 1 step ahead, was just getting started. The cafe was nearly empty when Daniel arrived. The early morning sun cast a soft glow over the polished wooden tables, and the faint hum of a coffee machine filled the silence. He spotted Charlotte Hayes near the window, her fingers lightly tapping against the rim of a black coffee cup. Her expression was unreadable, but the exhaustion in her eyes spoke volumes. She had been waiting for this moment. Sliding into the chair opposite her, Daniel didn't waste time on pleasantries. She reached into her bag, retrieving a slim folder, and pushed it toward him without a word. Opening it, his eyes scanned the contents with a practiced efficiency. Financial statements, internal emails, confidential memos. Each document was a puzzle piece fitting neatly into the bigger picture. There were clear indications of misappropriated funds, offshore accounts, and manipulated assets hidden behind layers of falsified reports. But what truly stood out were coded correspondences between Nathan and one of his key investors, outlining a deliberate attempt to siphon company money while shielding himself from any legal ramifications. The dates on the documents revealed just how long this had been going on. Charlotte had been sitting on this evidence for years, perhaps torn between confronting the truth and maintaining the illusion of stability. There was no more hesitation now. This was enough to destroy Nathan completely. By midday, the files were in Evelyn Pierce's possession. Her response was immediate and decisive. The next phase of Daniel's plan had begun. The leaks had to be subtle at first, just enough information to raise suspicions but not enough for Nathan to fully grasp the extent of the damage. Evelyn initiated the first whisper campaign among investors, strategically planting doubts about the company's financial health. A single crack in the foundation was all it took for unease to spread. Within hours, the market responded. A well-known financial blog published a speculative piece detailing discrepancies in Rains Industries' accounting records. Though carefully worded to avoid direct accusations, it was enough to send a ripple through the investment community. Stocks wavered, and cautious shareholders began quietly pulling out, sensing instability. Nathan, of course, noticed immediately. By nightfall, Daniel's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name on the screen confirmed what he already expected. Nathan. There was no urgency in answering. Letting the call ring twice, Daniel finally picked up, listening to the carefully restrained anger on the other end. Nathan's voice carried the sharp edge of a man trying to maintain control while feeling it slip from his grasp. He didn't ask if Daniel was responsible. He already knew. Instead, his words were laced with threats disguised as warnings, his bravado barely masking the anxiety underneath. The silence that followed stretched long enough for doubt to creep into Nathan's voice. Daniel knew he was waiting for some kind of reaction, some assurance that he still held the upper hand. But there was nothing. A single, indifferent response was all he offered before ending the call. Nathan's desperation would only grow from here, and desperate men made mistakes. 2 days later, the unraveling accelerated. A formal investigation into Rains Industries was launched, the company's assets frozen pending review. News outlets seized the story, headlines branding Nathan as the latest executive embroiled in financial misconduct. His carefully curated image as a visionary entrepreneur crumbled in real time. Investors abandoned him. Employees scrambled to distance themselves. The illusion of control shattered as his name became synonymous with corporate fraud. And Elena? Her silence had been telling. No calls. No messages. She had aligned herself with Nathan, believing she had secured something better. Now, all she could do was watch as the man she had chosen collapsed under the weight of his own deception. Daniel didn't need to hear her regret. He had already won. And the game wasn't over yet. Daniel sat in his apartment, watching the city lights flicker against the glass of his window. The past few weeks had unfolded exactly as he had planned. Nathan Rains had gone from an admired businessman to the subject of a financial scandal that dominated the headlines. His company was in freefall, his assets frozen, and his reputation beyond repair. Yet, Daniel knew this wasn't enough. Nathan still had fight left in him, still believed there was a way out. That illusion needed to be crushed entirely. Evelyn had continued her investigation, digging deeper into the past, and the latest findings provided the final piece of the puzzle. The fraud Nathan was currently being accused of paled in comparison to what had been uncovered. Years ago, before his name was well known, he had been involved in a large-scale embezzlement scheme, laundering millions through shell companies that no longer existed. The evidence had been buried, the records long forgotten, until now. Daniel had everything he needed. The legal system would eventually dismantle Nathan, but that process could take months, even years. Daniel preferred something faster. He wasn't interested in letting Nathan dictate the terms of his own downfall. The first step was ensuring that the authorities had all the necessary information. A carefully prepared dossier containing every uncovered transaction, bank transfer, and falsified record was sent anonymously to multiple agencies. The timing was crucial. The media was already circling like vultures, waiting for the next revelation in the unfolding scandal. Within hours, news broke that Nathan's past crimes were being reopened, and this time, the evidence was overwhelming. Nathan's options had officially run out. By midday, law enforcement had issued a warrant for his arrest. The once influential executive was no longer the predator. He had become the prey. But Daniel wasn't done. He had anticipated retaliation, and sure enough, it came. Subtle at first, Nathan reaching out to mutual acquaintances trying to find a way to negotiate. Then more aggressive. Attempts to disrupt Daniel's business surfaced, cybersecurity breaches that were both sloppy and desperate. Nathan wasn't trying to win anymore, he was trying to drag Daniel down with him. It was almost disappointing. Daniel had spent years designing impenetrable security systems, and dismantling these amateur attempts barely required effort. But he didn't just block the attacks, he traced them. Every digital footprint led straight back to Nathan, further reinforcing the case against him. Then, just as Daniel predicted, Nathan made his last mistake. Out of options, out of allies, and out of time, Nathan tried to flee. Surveillance footage captured him boarding a private plane, heading toward a country without an extradition treaty. He never made it. The moment he landed, authorities were waiting. The arrest was public, humiliating, and final. Watching the news coverage, Daniel felt no satisfaction. Just confirmation that justice had been served in the most efficient way possible. Elena's name had been largely absent from the scandal, but Daniel knew she wasn't unaffected. The life she had chosen was crumbling, the security she had sought vanishing. He had expected her to reach out at some point, and when she finally did, it was exactly as he imagined. A message, short and desperate. "We need to talk." Daniel never responded. Some doors, once closed, were meant to stay that way. With Nathan out of the picture, Daniel could finally shift his focus to what truly mattered, his own future. The war had been won, the past dealt with. Now it was time to build something even greater. The storm had passed. Nathan Raines was behind bars, his name synonymous with fraud and failure. His company had been gutted, his assets seized, and his influence erased. The damage was irreversible. In the aftermath, his former allies distanced themselves, investors scrambled to recover losses, and news outlets moved on to the next scandal. What remained of him was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a man who believed himself untouchable until the truth buried him. Daniel Mercer had ensured it. With his past finally severed, Daniel turned his attention to the future. The empire he had methodically dismantled had left behind valuable remnants, business connections, abandoned contracts, and clients searching for stability in the wake of Raines Industries' collapse. It was an opportunity he didn't intend to waste. His cybersecurity firm had already gained traction, but now, with his name circulating as the man who had exposed corruption, he was in high demand. Corporations sought him out not just for his expertise, but for his insight into digital vulnerabilities, his ability to anticipate threats before they materialized. He expanded aggressively, securing contracts with major firms, government agencies, and private investors. Yet, even as his company grew, Daniel remained cautious. Power had never been his goal. Control was. He had witnessed firsthand how empires collapsed under the weight of arrogance and recklessness. He would not make the same mistakes. Every move was strategic, every decision calculated. Amidst the rapid expansion, he found himself drawn into an unexpected alliance. Emily Hawthorne had been a rising name in the tech industry long before their paths crossed. They met at a security summit in San Francisco, where she had been delivering a keynote on scaling global infrastructure. Her approach was pragmatic, her insights sharp. Unlike the opportunists he often encountered, she wasn't interested in empty praise or shallow partnerships. She was focused on results. Their conversations were brief at first, technical discussions, debates over market trends, but over time they deepened. Emily saw through the carefully measured persona he projected, recognizing the relentless drive beneath it. Where others viewed his precision as cold detachment, she understood it for what it was, calculated efficiency. She never asked about the past, never probed into the events that had led him here. She didn't need to. She simply respected the man he had become. For the first time in years, Daniel found himself looking forward rather than back. Elena, on the other hand, had faded into irrelevance. After Nathan's downfall, she had attempted to reclaim some semblance of stability, but the life she had envisioned was no longer within reach. The people she had once surrounded herself with had moved on, unwilling to be associated with the wreckage of her choices. She had exchanged security for fleeting excitement, only to find herself left with neither. Daniel never sought updates on her, but occasionally, whispers of her struggles would surface. A failed business venture, a string of short-lived jobs, a lifestyle reduced to something far removed from what she once flaunted. He felt nothing. Regret was for those who had lost something they wanted. He had only gained. Years later, standing in his private office overlooking the city, he reflected on the path that had led him here. The betrayal that had once defined him was now just a distant memory, a catalyst that had propelled him forward. He had not only survived, he had thrived. The past was a lesson. The future was his to shape. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Mercer was exactly where he was meant to be.